I wake up in the middle of the night and I start to feel my stomach and I'm like, oh no. And before you know it, Ginge, I don't want to give TMI, but
No.
I don't know how you feel about this statement or how some of our listeners feel about this statement, but it was probably worse pain than childbirth.
You know what? Actually, I would say that it could be close to childbirth.
What's going on, guys? Ginger and Jeremy here, and we're back again for the 17th time. Hey, thanks for following us along on this journey every week of this podcast. We're getting more listeners every week, and glad you guys are here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And what are we talking about today? Because I don't know if we've talked too much about what we're talking about.
Yeah, so sometimes I prepare Ginger for topics, and then sometimes I'm literally springing them on you while we're recording. And this is one of them where I want to talk about the places we've traveled, because you and me collectively have traveled a bunch of places around the world, and you've got some cool stories.
I think you have cooler stories.
Well, we don't have to have a competition on who's
but
cooler.
But I think yours are cooler. You've been to more interesting,
well, I think yours are cooler
places.
Because you've been places I haven't been. There are places you've been that I really, really, really want to go, and then there's some places that neither of us have been to, which we should go to together.
Let's go.
And then, yeah, let's go. All right, let's go. Just kidding. There are so many European countries that I want to go to.
So what is like the place that in your mind right now, if you could go anywhere tomorrow, where would it be?
Italy.
Yep. I knew you were going to say that.
Did you?
Yes, it's because your roots are in Italy, and that's like where your family history comes from.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to say that. If you don't say that, you're not going to be able to claim any of your Italian heritage. So I'm glad you said that.
I was listening to, I've mentioned him before, the Lex Friedman podcast.
Yeah.
I like Lex. And he had an episode a month ago with Gregory Aldrete on the Roman Empire, the rise and fall of ancient Rome. And it was like 3 hours on Rome, and it was cool. Listen to it after you listen to our podcast. And he talked so much about the rolling hills and the food culture and the pasta of Italy. And it just made me go, I need to go to Italy.
A lot of my siblings have gone recently.
Yeah.
And they said that the most expensive thing is just getting over there. The flight is the most expensive. Lodging, food, they're all cheap. And they said that the quality of the food, even those who have maybe allergies or sensitivities to the food here, like wheat or something like that, they can have it in Italy because it's so much better for you. They are taking the wheat like at its purest form, and everything is just better.
Yeah, I'm into it. You don't have to convince me. I'll go. And you know what? If we went, I would want it to be like an unplug, because you got to enjoy Italy as an Italian, which means
yeah, there you go.
Sit around the table for hours. You don't
like
have
it.
anywhere to be.
I feel like that's the good thing about going overseas. That's what I always liked, was going overseas and not having to worry about that. Like, you don't have cell reception most of the time. You'll have to be on Wi-Fi. We would never pay to like have our phone switched over or anything. Occasionally there would be maybe like a phone we got just to use if we were going to be there for a longer period of time. But like when we traveled with crew, they always had communication stuff with, whoever they needed to communicate with, but we didn't have to. So we were pretty much unplugged, which was nice.
I just feel like there's certain places in the world you would have to be unplugged to enjoy it fully. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to do a tourist version of Greece or Italy or even Israel. I think there's something, and I want to hear about your time in Israel, but there are so many cool facts about Israel in terms of, placing the biblical story there and connecting it with different timelines. But I would just want to be amongst the people. I think that's one of the coolest aspects of traveling is learning about the cultures.
Okay, so with that, you have had some really interesting experiences. You went to Iraq and Lebanon, right? Mm-hmm. And anywhere else over there?
No, I mean...
Or was that the trip was...
Yeah, when this was in 2014 when ISIS was pushing up north from Iraq. They were taking over, terrorizing most of Iraq, and the last standing stronghold, which was resisting ISIS, was in Erbil.
Mm.
And so myself and a team of people went in and just brought a ton of resources for the refugees. Because what happened was millions of refugees were being forced out of their homes, and they were literally on foot running up to Erbil and finding refuge there. But what that meant was you had, I mean, overcrowding is an understatement.
Yeah, yeah.
You would have all these structures where literally thousands of refugees would be living, and there would be like 10 toilets. Or they were on the streets lined up in tents.
Wow.
And so it was a humanitarian crisis. And so obviously tons of resources were going in, and we just sent a team from our church with clothes, food. We sourced some stuff to bring to them, water, and just tried to serve them. And we would go to the outskirts. We even went outside of Erbil's city limits.
Was that scary? Like how scared were you that you were going to get involved in something
I
not come back?
I wasn't scared because I was young and single.
Naive?
Not naive. I think we were aware of the danger. We were told. We got an email the day we landed. We went to a hotel, and we were emailed and said, "Hey, just so you guys know, there are ISIS splinter cells with several placed within just a mile of you guys." And what those splinter cells were groups that if ISIS were to break the barrier and break through and enter Erbil, then these splinter cells would join them.
Engage, basically.
So like they would help them and engage them. So they were basically just laying low, but they were with ISIS. So all they needed was the support to come through, and then they would have come from within. So we would go through ISIS checkpoints. I remember we went right to the border of Iran, and you could see the border.
Oh,
and coming back, we went through a checkpoint, and I had a thicker beard, and it wasn't a white beard like it is now. This is back in 2014, and or maybe was it 2015? It was right before I met you. I think it was 2015 actually. And they pulled me out of the car, and they had me searched, and we sat there for 20 minutes just to make sure I didn't have any affiliation.
Whoa.
And then every night driving into the city, they'd have ISIS checkpoints.
Did you go shave your beard after that?
So I shaved it before going, but I didn't shave it completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before going, it was big.
Yeah, I saw
And
pictures
they were like,
of that.
yeah, they were like, you can't go like that.
Oh my word.
And then there was one point we were driving some refugees around, and it was myself and one other guy driving, and the refugees were in the back. And at one point they started freaking out, and they didn't speak great English, but they just started saying, ISIS, ISIS, ISIS. And we had made a wrong turn, and we're headed like straight out of the city the wrong way. And so we're like,
oh no,
turned around and came back.
That's so scary.
But I wasn't scared because it was thrilling. Like, and I was single. I didn't have, the girls at home.
Responsibilities of a family and all of that. Yeah.
I fit into that culture just because of my darker features. And so I didn't really stick out.
It would be easier for you to blend in. That's so true. Yeah. You don't have like blonde hair, blue eyes. You're not going to be like as much. That makes sense.
My buddy had sleeve tattoos and stuff though.
Ooh, did he just wear long sleeves?
Yeah, he'd wear long sleeves, but you could tell he had neck tattoos too, I think.
Oh yeah.
And so he was a little more, you could spot him.
Crazy.
It was really.
And then, okay, is that one of the times when you had like, you got really sick on a bus or something?
No.
When was that? What trip was that? I gotta hear about that
trip.
So
after Typhoon Yolanda, this was in 2004. That was 2014, or the end of 13, started 14. We went to like the week within days of Yolanda hitting the Philippines. And you know what's crazy is I found out a couple years later, talking to John David and some of the Bates boys, that we were there at the same time. They had gone over. That was before Medicorp was a thing. But we went on a disaster relief, and Doctors Without Borders, everybody, Red Cross was there. But what we did is we had these water filtration systems, and we had hundreds of them. And we went to the remotest parts of the Philippine jungles where nobody could go. Aid. Yeah, where aid couldn't get there yet. And so that was a wild trip. We spent 2 weeks in like the jungles down near... I'm forgetting the main city now, but Cebu was right, the island right next to us. We went to Cebu for a little bit, but we brought all these water filter systems.
Wow.
And
That's incredible.
that was crazy because the jail, one of the jails in the main little city there, was destroyed. And so you had like murderers and like everybody just running loose. And so every night we had a guy just sleep outside of our tent, and I would sleep on a hammock outside, and he'd have like a automatic weapon or something, and but he'd be like a kid, like a 15-year-old kid.
Whoa.
And he was our guard.
Oh, that you guys like hired?
No, just I think a local church there just said, here's somebody. So you're going to sleep because we're Americans. And
you're not like at that point, there's not like a good place for y'all to stay, I'd imagine. You're just kind of
we're camping out. It was
wherever you can find a place.
Like a level ground.
Wow.
And so much was destroyed.
Yeah.
So the one little city we were in, is outside of Tacloban is where we were. And there was a little village, and it was like an inlet in the ocean, and it became like a toilet. Like when the water came through and the tsunami came through.
Yeah.
It just like swirled around. And so you go in, and it was literally, you're walking on people's homes. It's just all rubble.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just completely destroyed. And you're sitting there with the people whose lives were destroyed. Many of them passed away. So they had lost family members, but then you're walking on their homes, which is just rubble. And so it was just rubble. So we were just camped out. We had a tent, and there's about 5 of us and 7 of us. And I slept in a hammock with a mosquito net over, but the mosquitoes just bit right through it.
Whoa. Okay.
So I remember my back getting all eaten up. They would only come from me.
How did you get sick? What happened?
So I woke up. We were there for about 2 weeks, and we were going to drive back up to up north. And it was like a 30-hour trip. We had to drive like
30 hours.
Something like that, because then we had to take a ferry across.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just wild. So
that is insane.
I wake up in the middle of the night, and I start to feel my stomach, and I'm like, oh no. And before you know it, Ginge, I don't want to give TMI, but
no.
I felt like, I don't know how you feel about this statement or how some of our listeners feel about this statement, but it was probably worse pain than childbirth. Do you think that's a fair statement?
You know what? Actually, I would say that it could be close to childbirth, because I've had food poisoning before, and I felt like it was. Well, okay. This is the side I'll say. Childbirth, it depends on how long it lasts, or if you get medicine.
That's true.
And
there's different aspects of childbirth.
There are different aspects, but at the same time,
points.
the pain that you can feel in your stomach. When I had food poisoning here, like I was in Laredo, I had food poisoning, and I thought
you were going to die.
Dying. I told you, I said, I think I'm dying, because it was so severe, and it felt like knives just being turned. So
that's what it felt like for me.
Yes. So I think it was close to childbirth. I will say that, and all the ladies will get mad at me for saying that. So.
Well, no, I actually have no objective way of quantifying that, but it was agonizing, and I began. Oh man, Ginge, we got in the car, and we're beginning this journey up, and I'm throwing up. Everything's going through me. And at one point I tell the driver, I said, you got to pull over, man. And he pulls over, and there's this little village, and people are walking around. It's like next to the road. And I just start puking my guts out. And I never forget, a woman was walking by with her kid and just was looking at me.
Oh.
Puking my guts out. And that was a moment. So
miserable.
It lasted for about 5 or 6 hours, and then it went away. I got some.
But traveling.
Oh yeah.
Like traveling while you're miserable.
And then
like
you're dehydrated.
That?
So I remember going into where we would go to the restroom was, it was like a little structure of brick.
Would you have to pay?
No, this is in the jungle. I mean,
that's like even in El Salvador, you'd be like in these places, and they'd make you pay to go to the bathroom.
Oh really?
Yeah, and pay for toilet paper.
That.
Yeah.
No, I mean this was like a little hut.
Okay.
And I remember, seeing snakes slither up the walls, and you'd get the little drop of water for your shower.
Yeah.
And spiders all over the place.
Yes.
But what's crazy is you in the moment, you're like, all right, this is what I got to do.
Yeah, totally. You don't even think twice.
Yeah. I do remember in that little hut thinking, I can't wait to be back on like a porcelain throne. But anyway, that's TMI. So I
Do they have squatty potties there?
that was
their thing?
in the Middle East.
Okay.
Well, you mean like just the hole in the ground?
Yeah, the squatty
that was the
potties,
Middle
because they
East.
had that in
Yeah.
Japan.
You call it a
maybe?
squatty potty?
Well, I mean, because that's what it basically is. They had the hole in the ground too.
Cute way of saying it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a nicer way. Yeah, it was really gross. I remember they had one of those on one of our trips too.
Well, so we
It was
would
kinda
go.
nasty.
I remember going to a wealthier home in Iraq, and their outhouse. It was a wealthy home, but it was just a hole in the floor. But the floor was like really beautiful porcelain, like beautiful tiles. And so you're just like, man, this is a different world.
Was there any food that you really like, even in the missions trips, the places you've been? Like, what is the best food you've had?
Well, it's the locals' food. So I just love the local food.
The food that you got food poisoning from was like
So I don't know
little
what
food
gave me
stand?
that food poisoning, but we would eat at the street
Yeah.
foods, street vendors. So in Iraq and Lebanon, the falafel and
I
shawarma.
love falafel. Yeah.
Oh my word! So for $1.25 or $1.50, they had these little street stands with shawarma all through the streets of Iraq, and I would go there 8 times a day. I would probably have 10 shawarma a day.
It's crazy.
I just kept going back because we were doing a ton of manual labor too.
Yeah,
like
you
we
were
were moving
exhausted.
all of these, whether it was clothes or food or whatever it was, and bringing them to the refugees. And so I was just stopping. It was $1.50. Oh my goodness! I cleaned up. Their economy
That's
probably
awesome.
just in that little region.
Skyrocketed. They're like,
Their
what happened in
shawarma
this area?
economy. They're like, who is doing this?
That's
But
great.
that was delicious. And then in the Philippines, we've talked about this before, balut.
Oh no, you cannot say that was good. Don't say that was good. That's like
It wasn't
an
good.
abomination.
It was awful, but I ate
Okay,
it.
good. I'm glad you agree.
So
That is
balut
just gross.
there's different forms of
No,
balut, but it's
don't
like
you talk about
a street
that.
food delicacy, and it's 21 day.
It's just wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll stop there.
It's
People
a
can
little
look it up
egg
and
with
look
the chick is.
So gross.
It was like rubber. It was
We'll
like
move
caviar,
on.
not caviar. It was
We'll
like
move on.
calamari.
We'll move on.
It was
no,
rubbery.
No, don't. No.
Although my friend who did it, she got a
Ooh, Jer,
feather.
too much. Ugh.
I wonder if anybody's had balut who's
Okay.
watching this.
Moving right along.
So what about, okay, so those were some missions trips, but you did missions trips in another part of the world. And
Yeah.
we've talked about that a lot because
We
it's
have.
part of our story and it was
Yeah.
on the show, but you would go to usually El Salvador and Honduras, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, El Salvador and Honduras is where we would go almost every single year. In December, right before Christmas, we would deliver Christmas gifts to villages that were in need. A lot of them, if we did not come, they wouldn't have Christmas. And so we would bring, oftentimes, like we'd bring to the village or to specific families that we knew or the church knew. We would bring like rice, oil, beans, things like that they could just use, like massive bags of them, and bring it. And then we would bring gifts for the kids. And so we would, before we went on this trip, we would get army duffel bags and shove them full of however many like backpacks we could get.
Yep.
So, yeah, it was just so crazy. We would travel to El Salvador with usually like 30 things of luggage or something like that, or maybe more. I don't even remember, because like depending on how many people went and you had 2 bags per person, if it was like half of my family, you know, like maybe like 10 or 11 of us kids would go each year, and then my dad, and with that, like we would take supplies, take gifts that we picked out. And so the gifts that we would take, we'd get gifts for like certain age groups, for like 7 to 8 year old girls. Like maybe it was like a doll, or for the boys, it could be like a soccer ball or something like that. And so we would get all of these gifts. And then once we got to the church where we would stay, then we would set everything up and get it all ready. And then we would have a giant Christmas party for that specific village. And then we'd go to another village and do the same thing. And a ton of other people would join in and come from all over, bring gifts, do the exact same thing. So it was like something that we look forward to every single year. And it was really sweet. I loved that we were able to have those experiences as kids, because like Christmas, you can quickly focus on the things that you get or don't get and just become so selfish and like self-centered. But I feel like going into December, every year we would be thinking like, what can we find for the kids?
Yeah.
What good bargains can we get to like be able
Yeah.
to take a ton of gifts? And so taking like, hundreds of Christmas gifts over was just like the highlight of our Christmas. And I think it just is good for kids to like see that, whether it's somewhere local, like the Salvation Army, Samaritan's Purse, any of those things. It's like helpful. I think we should do that with Felicity too. We did once before with her, but she was younger. So I think like this year, like filling a shoebox and like giving those gifts.
Yeah. Something your parents did really well, and I think my parents did as well, was just having us focused in times of the year when it might be your birthday or Christmas, or when you traditionally, or people often can become so self-centered, having the kids focused on serving others.
Yeah.
You might not have those opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many awesome places that give you opportunities to serve. We have a local place, Children's Hunger Fund, which is amazing. We actually went there with Felicity's school, and it was really fun. Like we got to go and fill boxes full of food. So we were there for a couple hours, her kinder class, and they were just having the best time like serving. And Felicity knew exactly like what this was about. And we talked to her about it before, and she was like, I'm so excited to send food to like kids who are my age in school and like their families too. Like just having that mindset of like serving people instead of just like, what can I get? Cause I think that like when you're super young, that is naturally what you're going to think. Like, what can you buy for me? But anyhow, she'll like, now Felicity will often mention that. And, I want to take her back soon. They have this thing called the poverty encounter, and you can like walk through it, and it's like really well done, just taking you through like what it looks like for kids who are in poverty in different areas of the world. So yeah, I think any of that exposure that you can bring and awareness to like us in such a comfortable place in the US, we have so much for like, that's just been handed to us. Yeah. And it's so easy to take it for granted.
Well, that's one of the things that traveling, people say traveling makes you cultured, or can help you be more cultured, however you define cultured. And it does. It exposes you to the world. It exposes you to different lifestyles, different ways of doing things. You start to see like entire cultures built on different assumptions, like, an honor shame culture in the East, where, so one of the things about traveling on a missions trip, whether it's officially that or just a bunch of, like, for me, it was, a few of us guys would get together and go, hey, we're going into the tsunami zone, and here's the resources we have. Or if it's something like what you guys were doing, going to El Salvador with gifts for Christmas, it allows us to understand, how so many people in the world are living their struggles, hopefully to the end of not just making us go, man, super glad we have these comforts back here.
Right.
But because that's how sometimes it's posed, is like, hey, do you want a better perspective?
Yep.
Go see how other people are struggling. You'll be happier
like
for the stuff
kids,
you have.
That's helpful. Honestly, like for kids, that's where it starts.
It starts there, but then it helps them
to
demonstrate true compassion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where it's not just feeling something, but it's doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The action side of it. And that's what I think, is important for, regardless of where you are, to like look around you. It can be in your local community. There can be like a food bank or things like that where you can go serve. And so I think it's helpful. Just like have that perspective of like not just looking at my little world right in my life, like what's going on. But to be taking action to do good.
Right. Yeah. And so you built relationships with people even down there that became really special to you.
It was sweet. Like I didn't speak Spanish. I felt like I spoke maybe a few words, but every year that we would go back, we would meet, like there were a couple little kids that would like follow us around in Honduras. And it was so sweet. They would come, they'd be at the church where we were staying. They would be there at like 6 a.m. waiting for us to wake up. And we'd wake up and have to go to we go to team breakfast, whatever. Everybody would go, and we'd have our breakfast. It was usually like bread, refried beans, and sometimes eggs. Not every day there was eggs, and I'm a big fan of eggs. I like have to have my eggs, but it's good. So we would do that, but then you'd see these kids sitting out there, and then I would just think, wow, like, I don't know if they had breakfast this morning. And so like we had snacks with us too, and they only had so much food for the team that they were serving there. And so if there were people who would just flock to the church, they served them food other times or like things like that. So we were able to deliver food to like their homes. And it was really precious to see how grateful they were for beans and rice and the basics, and oil was like huge. So things like that where, you look at them and see these sweet little kids, and then every year we go back, we'd watch them grow up. Mm-hmm. And it was just sweet having those relationships. They'd like want to just walk around with you or hold your hand, the little ones, as we would trek to different areas to like give Christmas gifts and stuff. So yeah, they would just kind of like travel along with us. And I was thinking, I wonder if your parents are okay with this, but they didn't seem to care, because they were like, you're with these people that we see every single year come back, and you're serving. So they would let their little ones come along with us on those hikes, and it was really precious.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one of those boys following me around everywhere I went.
Yeah.
In Honduras and El Salvador. Or it would have been in Honduras.
Honduras, yeah.
Yeah.
That was so sweet. It was really, really amazing. It's making me want pupusas right now. So.
Oh, man. So talk about the food experiences for you. You asked me. But, yeah. I mean, there's nothing like pupusas in Honduras.
Yeah, and when they're just making them right there, I mean, it's a labor of love. It takes a lot of time, especially if you have a big team, 60, 70 people. It's going to be an all day. I don't know. It feels like an all day thing. Maybe not, but we'd have them in the morning. And it was so, so great. We also ate a lot of like sandwiches on white bread with like, I don't know what it was. I feel like it was maybe mayo with a piece of cheese and white bread.
Okay.
So
are you saying this is a delicacy, or talk about it? What do you?
No, we would eat that as like maybe like a lunch or something. Yeah. So you don't love mayo. That's not local flavor, so that's something you guys brought. No, they would serve it to us because it was like probably just because it was like, it's something that's cheaper to make and it's easy to take on the road. And so we did that as well. But we brought lots of snacks too because, I don't know, some people with blood sugar issues, we have to be a little more careful.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. Like the main food, the pupusas there were really good. The coffee beans from Copan, Honduras. Oh my word.
Is that where you fell in love with coffee?
Well, I actually loved coffee. Yeah, probably sometime over that because I was going there when I was younger. And then around 14, I started drinking it. And then the coffee beans in Copan, like people would bring them back to the States. They would buy multiple bags and bring them back for friends because it was so fresh and so good.
What was the chicken that they would bring back on the plane?
Let's see. It's not El Pollo Loco. It was something. Oh, dang. I'm not remembering it. What was it? Pollo Campero, maybe?
I
think that's it. You got to look it up because this box.
El Salvador or Honduras?
El Salvador. And they would bring back on the plane. You're flying on like a big aircraft with like, the really big ones for overseas. It's only like a 3.5 hour flight to Dallas.
Yeah, Pollo Campero or Pollo Bonanza.
Let me see, Pollo Campero. I think that's it.
Pollo Campero.
And
yep, it is.
Basically, like, you would see all of these locals. They were flying home for Christmas, or they were flying to the States. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, maybe that.
So they were flying to the States, and they would bring under the seats. They would put bags and bags of chicken, like massive boxes, but then they put them inside these bags. And the whole plane on the way back from El Salvador always smelled like chicken. Mm-hmm. It was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
That was a thing. You remember that?
Yep. I remember them bringing.
You're like, what is this? But it's just a taste of home for those who have moved to the States from El Salvador to like take it back to their families, I guess.
Yeah.
Wild. And since it was such a short flight, it's like 3.5 hours, they were able to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing how certain foods just don't taste the same as when you take them across the border.
Right.
It was that way in Nuevo Laredo. You'd have tacos in Laredo, but there was something about them in Nuevo Laredo across the border that they just tasted different.
Crazy.
I don't know if it's the ingredients. I don't know what it is.
It's
No,
wild.
is it FDC or whatever?
MSG?
No, FDC regulations.
Oh, I
like
was going to say, is it
food.
the MSG you're tasting? It probably
Yeah.
is, Jeremy.
Probably less.
So
So
funny.
you spent some time in the Middle East as well, though. And what was that like? I mean, you've been to Israel once on a trip, and it was with the whole family.
That
Oh,
was,
here's a question.
yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it was fun, but what I'm like, yeah, it was fun, but you know what just popped in my head was traveling with all those kids.
Yeah.
So you and we've gotten a little tired of traveling while the girls are.
Well, we only have
So
2
small.
kids, one
I
on the
know.
way. It's so difficult to travel.
I
No,
know.
it really is.
But when you're talking about a 5.5, 6 hour flight across the country, it just becomes a lot. You got 2 car seats or something. You've got 4 bags. It's a lot. How did you do that with 19 kids,
wild.
adults, the whole crew?
No, I don't know how I did it. No, I'm kidding. So we basically, like, half of us kids were older at that point, and so we are able to, like, help out some.
Yeah.
So we went on quite a few international trips where we were gone for like a month, and it was all of the siblings and then a couple of so like my oldest brother and his wife, their kids, they had a couple kids, maybe like Kinsey and Michael at that age were able to travel too. So like, and then grandma and Amy went to Israel too. So we had a couple other family members.
Oh
And
yeah,
then we
you've
had
got an
crew.
entourage. Yeah.
Then we had crew. So like that was also part
It's
of our
40
trip.
people.
Yeah. So like when we get on the plane, it was just wild. Like you'd walk down every other row and it felt like there was, there's our people over there. Like it was just crazy. So like wild traveling, but we didn't have to plan out any of the logistical stuff because we were filming those trips.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would basically like make sure everyone's passports were up to date. I say we didn't have to do logistical stuff, but like packing for the trips, Jess and I would pack for the trip for all of the siblings, like pretty much like even our older, like, the ones who are above us or whatever, like, okay, we're going to pick out coordinating outfits. We're going to line out what we're going to wear because part of that was, I don't know, like at that stage, Jess and I did not want to match. We were all against matching, but we were okay with coordinating. So we're like, if we want to be able to find the kids, let's actually get everyone in something that looks stylish. And so we would go get Brooks Brothers magazines and like we would look them up and see, okay, what are they wearing this fall? And then we go to the thrift stores and try to find things that would look good and like put it in, like it was fun. Like we liked the fashion side of it, even though we were not very fashionable. We were trying to come out of like more like really dated clothes into like somewhat modern for us. It felt like that. And so Jess and I would volunteer to pack for those trips. And so the easiest thing to do is when you have that many people you're packing for, we had a suitcase where it would be like, okay, this is going to be we're going to do like green and purples and whites. That's what we're doing for this color code. And we're going to all wear something within that realm. It can be any style, but we're going to put it in a suitcase and everybody's clothes will be there. And we know then if we pull out that suitcase, that's going to be for that day because you're traveling from hotel to hotel. You're gone for 3 weeks or a month or whatever overseas. It is not easy. So with all of that, we basically like would come up with a theme of like clothes, figure out what the weather was supposed to be over there, and then try to make it work. So it was interesting. Like it was really fun. So that logistical side was enough to get ready for it.
Did you ever lose luggage?
I can't remember. I don't remember losing like a ton. No. And if we had a couple times where bags would like, they wouldn't show up for like maybe a day or something. And then they'd end up like they deliver it to your hotel or wherever we were staying. And so, it was fun, but it was also like crazy. So on the day you get to the airport, that's when the chaos begins because you show up with all of these bags, like so many suitcases, and then you have car seats. You have kids.
How many car seats were traveling with you?
At that point, let's see, we probably would have only had maybe like 4 if we took car seats with us.
Really?
4 or 5. Because the younger kids, like some of them, it may have been like a booster seat or something.
Yeah.
Some of them we actually rented. So I don't remember on the international trips. We may have actually just rented some over there. That's something I don't remember. But I do remember the suitcases.
So Courtney Enlow, who, I don't know, she was doing the
Coordinating
logistics.
producer. Yeah.
Yeah. But the amount of administrative.
Oh, my word.
You think about that. You have to coordinate.
Yeah.
Every
Hotels,
single car, hotel,
cars, buses, basically.
make sure there's car seats.
Yeah.
Meals.
Getting us from like one shooting location to the next. It could be hours of driving. You know, we're going from Ireland, Scotland, London. You go all over, right? Like, and she's having to find places that are, one, safe for us to go to in some of these areas. Not there, but like in Israel, for instance, right? Like, there are areas you don't want to go to at certain times, and with, you know, all the things that can happen. Like, you're trying to plan out everything. And then hotel rooms, how many people can stay in a hotel room? Well, I don't know. Like, right. It's wild, you know, and like having the safety. So you have to have like a security person often travel with you, just because you're going overseas and we won't be able to like understand the language or protect ourselves. To have somebody who can translate for you, because half of the places we went, even Japan, China, all of that, like you have to have people along with you the whole time. And I think the government even sent somebody in China to watch us when we were there.
Did you ever make one of those larger trips overseas or on airplanes without the film crew where you guys were doing all the logistics?
El Salvador and Honduras.
Oh, yeah.
They went on a couple of those trips. They tagged along, but most of the time that was just our thing.
Totally, yeah.
And then, but as that wasn't even like an overseas trip. Mm-hmm. So most of the overseas ones, like if we flew all together as a family, it was the crew. Because, I mean, at that point, it would have been impossible for all of us to do that. Even financially, it's a lot to like put out for that many people. And so my family now travels overseas a lot, which is cool.
But they'll do it separately. Like James and
little sections,
a few
but
brothers
I mean,
will go.
Not even that. Like I think a lot of them are going overseas. They do that often. Like my parents will go take all the ones who are at home, but it's not that many now.
Right.
It's like
so
6 of them.
It's broken up. Yeah.
8 of them. Yeah.
Still a lot.
It is.
We're thinking about with our third coming along, 5 of us. It
costs a lot to travel.
Costs a lot, but then it's also exhausting.
Yeah, but when they're older too, I think that's the thing. Yeah. My siblings are older now, so it's not as crazy. But with those little ones, I think I already told this story on the podcast. Maybe not, but like one of my siblings was wandering the aisles, like on one of the international trips, and the like flight attendant was like carrying, I think it was it Josie or Jordan? Jenny? I don't remember. Carrying this child like back down the aisle until they found their parents, because, you know, we would sit with our buddies on the plane. And that was another thing where my parents, like, they had the buddy system set up where we would take care of siblings. And so like I had Jed and Johanna. Those were my buddies that I would watch out for. And, you know, I was like, 14 on one of the trips. Another trip I was probably like 16 or something. So I had them sit with me. So I'd have like one on each side. And then each of the older siblings had that as well, just to like keep an eye on them to make sure that they were good. But at some point we're going to fall asleep and you have to sleep. It's an international flight. It's super long. So
did any of them ever get lost?
Happen.
Or did the buddy system work flawlessly?
No, we lost Jackson, I think, in the airport. And I think that was on the show. It was like we were probably headed on an international trip, if I remember correctly. And we couldn't find Jackson and he got lost. And I think that maybe an airport security officer brought him back or something.
That's wild.
To us. But I don't remember that. Some other people will probably correct me.
What about in New York City? I mean, I remember you've shown me clips of walking through New York City. And were you guys literally holding hands or?
Yeah. Like,
I mean, how do you stay all together?
Well, the buddy system. That's it. Like I'm accountable for 2 people and then I know to follow the group. Right. So you're old enough to like keep an eye out. You know, I would have been younger then. I probably would have been 12 or so when we were like doing a lot of those trips. We went to New York a lot, but like, I think most of the time we were old enough to like know to keep the little ones with us. So if I just had 2, I'm not keeping track of like all the little kids. I just have 2 of them with me holding a hand, you know? So we didn't lose anyone in New York. It's surprising that kids were not lost or left behind because I mean, there's just so many moving parts that it easily could have happened. But I think that my mom was very organized. She always had a plan. And part of that was it seemed pointless to dress in the same color. But I honestly think it helped because if we were all dressed in bright red, then if a kid like wanders away, you're like, okay, it's easier to spot them. So that's why we would often dress in the same color. As we got older, we kind of just like protested that idea because, you know, you're older and you don't want to be matching. Like, it's weird. You don't want to be lined up like stair step. That's another thing we would do, like birth order, Kodo, what it was called.
Kodo?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, that code order.
Oh, wow.
And they're like,
wait,
okay,
they would say
line
that?
up. And then we'd get an order from birth order, shortest in the front to oldest in the back. And yeah, I don't know. The older we got, we didn't like it.
What would you do that for? Like on Good Morning America or when you're performing on a show?
Yeah, we do that to like walk out, or if we were performing or like on a show, we do that all the time because they wanted to see the
Code O.
But then, yeah.
We're going to try that with Felicity and Evie and see what happens.
They will look at you like you're crazy.
Code O.
Yeah. So things like that we would do. But I think traveling overseas was like one of the best things for us. It just really opens your eyes to like different cultures, things around you where like I had never had sushi. You know, we go to Japan and China and I'm like, I've never had sushi. They cut open a giant tuna and they literally like cut it open there. They like take a little fillet of like fresh sushi and like hand it to you. And I was too afraid to eat it. So I didn't. And things like that where I look back, I'm like, oh, dang, I'd give anything to do that now.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like just learning the culture, just seeing how you can go almost anywhere. And it's like you can appreciate the differences that you have, whether you're dining on the floor or sitting at like a grand table. You know, it's like you want to appreciate the differences. And I think that's something that traveling overseas does for you. Really opens your eyes to the world around you, seeing how they operate and what is culturally acceptable and what's not.
Yeah.
It's just cool.
Well, that was something in the Middle East. Every home we would go to, whether this was a temporary shelter where the refugees had fled or whether it was someone's actual home, and whether you spoke their language or not, they'd invite you in, they'd make tea, they'd serve you food, and you ate. And I remember going to more than one place and just being welcomed into a home, sitting there on a dirt floor and eating, drinking tea, looking at each other, saying nothing because there's nothing to say. We can't talk. And then saying, thank you, leaving. And it was sweet because of the community aspect of that. And that really does bring together. And then there was like, we had a feast. This was out on the outskirts of Erbil, and we had a feast at a man's home, and it was all on the floor. And it was like you're so pulling, cool, you know, chicken off the bone and getting with your pita and, you know, the hummus. And I mean, it was just incredible, but just a different culture. And so that's cool. What incredible experiences. And I can't imagine doing that. You know, I did a lot of that when I was single by myself, and you did that. You traveled the world with like 30 other people.
Yeah. It was crazy.
Cool.
And I think looking back, I think now like us thinking about, we've wanted to go overseas. But we keep saying like, maybe when the girls are just a little older, you know, and then now we're expecting another one. It's like, maybe in like 4 years or something. And also I went
the opposite way. I said, let's just do it then.
Let's just do it now. Yeah. Like seriously. But I think you can really do it at any time. But I think also I've thought about it, like how much would they remember if we did it now? Yeah. So I also want to do things like that, or like take them to Disney when it's like memorable for them, when they will remember it for a longer period of time. For sure. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, well, Ginge, good stories. That was
I love
entertaining.
your stories.
I appreciated hearing some of that. Some of that I didn't know. Well, thanks for hanging out, guys. We'll see you again soon. Like, subscribe, leave us a comment, and catch you later.